Okay, hi, we're at Microsoft Development Center in Copenhagen. We're talking to Michael Fruergaard from Dynamics.
That's right.
So Michael, if you can just tell us a little bit about what you do and what the product is.
Okay. I joined Damgard Data in 1996. That's almost 10 years ago. And back in those days, I had no idea that I'd be working on something as dry as a business application. But really once you get into it, you realize how many software disciplines are involved. So we have a database layer. We can support a SQL database, an Oracle database, and at one point in time we also had our own proprietary database system.
Well, what's a business application?
So a business application is an application that takes care of companies' businesses. So it keeps track of chart of accounts, it keeps track of customers, vendors, inventory items, customer relationships, planning, production, and all that.
So what have you done?
So I've primarily been working on the more technical aspects. I still have all the business application to learn. I've been focusing on a lot of security lately, the help system, how to develop in the right manner. We have our own language in this system, so we also have compiler technology. I've been involved in writing the best practices for this language.
So I'm very interested. How long has Microsoft had this product? How do we get it?
So Microsoft acquired Navision in 2002. So Microsoft has had it for close to 4 years now, and we're approaching the first release with the Microsoft branding. So version 4.0 is just coming on and scheduled to release this summer.
So, and how old is the code base? Is it new?
Not really. The code base started in 96, 97. We released the first version in 98, but it's really a successor of an older product called XAL for Extended Application Language. So we have code that are 15, 20 years old in the code base.
And this product's called Dynamics AX.
Yeah, the AX is short for Axapta, so we have been through a rebranding. So Dynamics AX is the same as Axapta.
And where did the name Axapta come from?
I think we paid a small fortune for it once. We had a marketing company figuring out what a good appropriate name would be that made sense in all languages. So that's where Axapta came from.
Okay, so you're going to talk to us about the developer experience, how the developers program in Axapta.
That's right.
So why do you think this is a good environment for developers?
So first of all, it's very productive to develop, and it kind of puts modeling on a higher level, so you're abstracting away from the implementation details, such as what database you're using, what file system you're using, stuff like that, and lets you focus on the domain of your problem domain. So you will be talking about customers, vendors, chart of accounts, items, which is really what you're focusing on. You don't want to get too involved in the low-level details, if you can avoid it, at least.
So if I'm a developer and I wanted to provide a sales order capability for customers, what would I have to do? So
sales order is available out of the box, but it could be you want to extend it. So if you want to capture some more information when your employees are typing in sales orders, basically you would have to add a new field to the table. It will automatically, we have a table definition inside our language, and it will then be automatically pushed to the database. So the field information is persisted in the database. Then you need it on the UI and perhaps on some reports, and it's quite simple because you just place the field in a field group, and since all our UI elements, both reports and forms and web forms, are generated out of these field groups, it will be shown automatically.
Okay, so I believe you can get all this functionality with 27 clicks, because that's...
Yeah, I have a demo and I've counted the clicks. So what we want to do first is not extend existing functionality, but we want to create our own new table, create a UI for the table so we can type in data. The data will of course be persisted in a SQL database. I'll show that using the Enterprise Manager. And we'll have a report for this as well. And I'll be using 27 mouse clicks. I will not be using the keyboard at all.
Okay.
So if you think about how much we go through here, it's quite impressive because we have a middle tier, we have the database layer, we have the client, and all this is wired up together. We have marshalling across the tiers, all that without using the keyboard. It's quite impressive.
Great.
So before we begin, let's just take a look at what's available inside the product. So this is a business application. We have a general ledger module where you have chart of accounts, some budgeting, fixed assets. We have cost accounting, banking, customer relationship management, accounts receivable and payable, inventory management, master planning, production, and quite a few more. So it's a quite wide product. It supports many business scenarios.
What size company would use this product?
So it's from the mid-sized market and upwards. It's not for smaller companies. It's targeted for around 50 users and up.
Manufacturing distribution.
Primarily, yes. Yeah. So if we just close the main menu and open up the development environment instead, we can now see the application object tree, which is the repository for all the development going on. So all elements that you use to develop is in here. So for our scenario, we want to create a new table. So we go to tables and say new. So now we get table 1. Currently it has no field, so it's kind of a boring table. So what we do is we open another instance of the application object tree and we find some extended data types. Extended data types are used to model primary primitive types. So let's take account name, drag over as a field, and account number, drag over as a field. Here we go. Now we save it. While saving, it's actually synchronizing to the SQL database. So currently in the SQL we'll have this table. So far so good. Now we also want a UI so we can type in information to this table. So I'll open up the application object tree again, go to forms and create a new form. A form consists of some methods, data sources and a design. So we'll drag over the table we just created as a data source. There we go. And we need to add something on the design so the form will look good. We'll add a grid control and we'll drag to the grid control the fields we created, the account number and the account name. That's it. I think I've used my 27 mouse clicks. We'll just save it all. And if we run this form, we now have a form I can type in. Now I'm using the keyboard. I can type in account numbers and account names. I can save it. I can create a new record. And that's it. So if I want to print this report, I have to make a change more. If we go back to the table definition, we have field groups. One is called auto report. This field group is by default empty, but I can drag in the fields I want to include on reports, just like this. I'll save the table. Let's go back to the form and click the print icon. And if we just modify the output so it will print to the screen instead of the printer. I just need to find the OK button. There we go. Then click OK. We actually now have a report that we could print on paper with the information we just typed in. Wow. So let's just see in SQL Server Enterprise Manager that we really have this table. This is the Enterprise Manager. If we drill into my database, it's called Acceptor DB. We have tables. And we have the table I just created, table 1. And we can say return all rows. And we here have the account number and name, some system fields, and we have the values for the 2 rows I just created.
Wow.
Quite simple.
So with the 27 clicks, we've created a table schema, put it in the database, created a form, been able to manipulate that with data, and created a report. Did we do anything else?
I think that's about it.
That's enough.
Yeah.
You can also do batching as well, right?
You can do batching. You can implement operations using the language X++. Do you want me to show you how to write?
Let me ask you, I wanted to ask you, what makes this possible? I mean, how is it possible for you to do all this with 27 clicks?
So it's primarily because the design decision for the development environment is to make it simple to do so. So there are a lot of things you cannot do in this environment. If you want to write a device driver or a 3D action game, this is not suitable for you at all. but it's focused on writing business applications. So all forms in Axapta look pretty much the same, which is why it's so simple to make them. If you want more colors, animation, stuff like that, it's very, very hard to do.
So can you tell me what MorphX is?
Yeah, MorphX is the name of the development environment. So
this is the environment you were just using?
Yeah, that's what I just showed. Yeah.
Wow.
So it has a language, X++ editor, it has the AOT we saw, it has compiler, all that stuff.
So I believe there's something else called IntelliSense. What's that? Can you show us some of that?
Yeah, IntelliSense is when you're in the editor, get IntelliSense on what you look up. So if you write a dot, you get the list. So what I want to show you is actually IntelliMorph. Okay. So IntelliMorph is a technology we use to make localization easier for once. Considering a product that's this complicated, it's quite hard to localize because it's not just a matter of localizing all text resources. It's also a matter of localizing to all the countries we ship to because they have different legislation. For instance, sales tax is quite different depending on where you live. In Denmark it's a fixed percentage. In Sweden it depends on the item. Books and food have a lower sales tax. In the States it depends on the state. So that's quite complicated. With IntelliMorph we're able to automatically map the UI to fit the functionality and the text resources available for that country. So let me show you. I think that's much easier than talking about it. So we'll just return to Axapta. What we want to do is extend the application with functionality. So suppose we realize that the current address is not good enough. Suppose we want to add planet as part of the address. Today we have street number, we have city, zip code, state, county, country. Suppose we want to add planet. To do that we'll create an extended data type. It would be string based and we would say, let's call it planet. Now I'll open up the property sheet for the planet and we can type in a label. Let's just call it planet. Label is a UI text that will be presented whenever fields of this type is shown on the UI. Let's save that. So now let's find a form or a table where we can add this to. Let's take the customer table. It contains all customers, so we'll add this field. Again, we do this by dragging an extended data type onto the table. Since I'm using version control, I just have to check out the object before I can actually modify it. So now we'll just drag it over and save it. Right now we have the field, it's in the database, but it's not shown anywhere. We want it to, now we see the compile output coming up. We want it to be available as a part of the address. To do this, we will, I just opened it, we'll drag it into the field group called address. So here we have street, zip code, and city and so on. We'll drag planet in here. That's basically all we have to do. Now I just saved it. If we get rid of this window and go back to the main menu that we started with seeing, go to accounts receivable, open up customers, we'll now notice that the address of the customer contains the planet. So I can actually now type in here whatever I want. So this automatically went through by IntelliMorph to be morphed into this form.
Wow.
So you can add items to the UI using IntelliMorph, but you can also remove it. So a simple way to demonstrate this removal is personalization of forms, but the same really applies for security and configuration. So if there are functionality you don't have in certain countries, it can be removed. And it's really just a matter for personalization to right-click on a field and say hide, and it will disappear. The system will do the same for things you're not allowed to see, either because of security setting or configuration and licensing. So we can remove entire parts of the form. Now remove the grid, so the form suddenly is quite unuseful. And I can go back and say show all, and we're back to where we started.
So I just noticed something. Can you go back to the AOT?
Yeah. Let's just clean up a bit here.
What is the sys markings and...
The sys is the layer in which we're working. Since no two businesses are alike, we have a customization story based on layers. Microsoft ship everything in the sys layer, which is the lowest layer. Yeah. If we just go to the whiteboard. Okay. We have the sys layer, which is all the way in the bottom. This is the lowest layer. Microsoft ships everything in this layer. The size of the layer is about 0.5 GB because it contains all the metadata definitions of elements. It contains all the X++ code and all the compiled code. So each layer you can consider a transparent film. So we have a stack of 8 layers. We have the GLS layer on top, which is used for global solutions. We have the DIS layer, which is used for distribution of solutions. We have LOS for local solutions, BOSS for business solutions, VAR for value-added retailer solutions, COS for customer solutions, and user, which is for the user, for one business. So the closer you get to the top, the closer you get to the actual implementation at the user. Each layer you can consider a transparent film, so you can, in a layer, modify an object, and if you modify it, it will pick up that version unless it's modified in a higher layer. And if not, the runtime will look down through all the layers and pick up the definition of the object that it finds.
Have you got an example?
Yeah,
Show us some X++ code or something for a class?
So yeah, we can do that. Let's just do it in UML. So let's write a class, my class.
And that's in the sys layer?
That's in the sys layer. It has 2 methods, method 1 and method 2. We actually persist each method in the layers as separate units. So if I go into the var layer, for instance, I could open up the definition of my class, and then I could add a new method, method 3, and I could modify method 1. Let's call method 1 primed. At runtime, the system will, based on these class definitions, create a new class that objects are instantiated out of. It will still be called my class. It will have method 1 primed because method 1 is overriding method 1 from the sys layer. It will have method 2 from the sys layer and method 3 from the var layer. So at runtime we instantiate these objects, and it makes customization quite easy.
Wow. So, and this is a 3-tier application, right, that does all this?
It's a 3-tier application. So if we draw the tiers, we have a database. We have a middle tier, we call it the AOS. It's short for Application Object Server. It communicates with the database, of course. And then we have 3 different clients. We have the rich client, which is what we just saw for Windows. We have a web client, a reach client, that you use when you access the business application through the Internet Explorer. And finally, we have a business component, which is a COM interface. It's basically a faceless client, but it allows you to integrate with any language supporting COM, like Word, from Word or Excel, using COM automation and VB script, for instance.
And where are all the application layers?
All the application layers are stored on a file server separately. So it's just a file server. There are files that the AOS reads. So the 3 tiers are either the client tier, the middle tier, or the database. So the logic we write can run on either the application object server or in each of the clients. And the 3rd tier is the database. We're not able to push the logic down there, but we still have data there, so that's the 3rd tier. When someone makes a modification to a class like we just did in the var layer, it's very easy to deploy it, because all you have to do is upload the var layer to the file server. The AOS will automatically pick up that it has changed, and it will push the changes to all the clients. So changing business logic on a large scale is also possible, quite simply.
Can this application scale out?
It certainly can. You can have clusters of AOSs, and you just need one instance of the database, but it can also be spread across several boxes.
So, can you tell us a little more about X++? Is that?
Yeah, so X++ is the language we use for writing our business application. It belongs to the family of curly braces languages. So if you're familiar with C# or C++ or Java, it's quite easy to understand. But one of the benefits from this language, and the reason why we did implement a new language in the first place, is because it supports built-in SQL syntax. Perhaps I should just demonstrate it by example. I think that's easiest. So if we return to the screen here, what I'll do is I'll create a new job, which is a way to type in X++ code. And since we created a table called table1, I can declare it like this. And let's call it the variable myTable. Now I can do a while select myTable. And I add in a where myTable. Now we get IntelliSense. And we have the two fields, account name. So actually I don't want to do a where, I want to do a sort by, which is called ordering. Order by account name. I think we just have to do like this. And then we can say print myTable dot account name. And let's add a pause.
So that was pretty cool. You got IntelliSense.
I got IntelliSense of the fields, yes. So the type was created for me because of the definitions I did in the AOT. If I run this, I don't see much, but that's because of the screen resolution. Let's just change this to be info, then it's easier to read. So now it prints out the two account names I put into the form we created before. So I can access the data quite easy in the language. I don't need to be worried about converting to SQL statements or reading the data or anything like that. I just, in a type-safe manner, reference the table I created.
So does this support all the select statements?
It does not support all select statements from SQL, but it supports the most common. So we have order by, group by, we have while select selects, we have support for literals or placeholders. We have joins, inner joins, outer joins, exist join, not exist join. We have insert record set, update record set. We have delete from.
What about transactions? Do you have
so we have full transaction support as well. If I need to update data, it needs to be within a transaction. So we have keywords like TTS begin, TTS commit, and abort.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about CLR interrupt?
So that's a new feature in 4.0. So we can actually write CLR code directly in X++ as well. So I'm not sure if I can remember exactly. Let's create a new job. I can write system, which is the namespace of a CLR, and now get IntelliSense directly into the system namespace. So I believe we have a type called GUID.
So those are all the system, wow.
Yeah, so this works, and it will create a CLR object of the type GUID.
Cool.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you, so I noticed that you don't use X++ to define a form, for example.
No.
So how's that possible?
So to lift the abstraction layer, we don't want to write too much code. What we do instead is we model it in the AOT. So we have a tree view of forms. If we just return to the form we created, we have it here. So we have the design, and we build the design in a tree structure instead of in a what you see is what you get manner or in code, because the tree basically captures what you want to do. There's a hierarchy in a form. So you have a tab contains tab pages, each tab page contains controls like a grid. Grid can contain other controls. So here we have a grid and two string fields. If we wanted to add a tab, we would say give me a new tab, and we would add tab pages to this, and we can now move the grid onto the tab page. So we still retain the hierarchy we just created. If we open the form now, we'll see that we now have a tab.
And then we can still add X++ into the methods, right?
And we can still add X++ to the methods. So it could be we want to override a method like page activated, which is called when the tab is activated, and we can add code here. Right.
Great.
Yeah.
So this is pretty powerful stuff.
Indeed, indeed.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to tell us about the development environment or the architecture?
One of my of the things I think is best in the new version is the version control system. So previously in 3.0 we didn't have versioning of all the objects, but now we have integration with Source Depot and we have integration with Visual Source Safe. And it basically means we can see the revisions of all the changes we did. So to just demonstrate this, I could take the cost table that we checked out before and say I want to compare with the version in Source Depot. So here we have all the versions in Source Depot. I can compare two of the versions, or I could simply say I want to compare with the changes I did. I can right click, say add-ins.
And now you're comparing?
I'm comparing the changes I did before I checked them in with the current version in Source Depot. So this takes a while because it's querying the Source Depot server.
That's Source Depot, that's not...
It's Source Depot sitting on the other... yeah, on the flip side of the earth. It's in Redmond, so it takes a short while.
Is the Exactus just developed here in...
Oh no, we have development centers more or less across the globe. We have in Redmond, Fargo and Copenhagen, they're the big ones, but we also have local centers where we develop local functionality.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to understand the local legislation to be able to ship this product.
So it really is a global product?
It is really a global product.
Do you know how many languages that you support?
I think we support over 30 countries and of course their language. Yeah. So now we have the version from the SYS layer. We can actually compare with the old SYS layer, which is the 3.0 version. And we can pick all the versions from Source Depot. So let's just take the latest and click compare. Now it will do a line per line comparison of all the definitions of the customer table. So it's all the fields, all the indices, the methods, and so on. Hopefully it will just show us that we added Planet. And
so I want to know how big is this application? How many lines of code, tables?
So the runtime system, including the development environment, is about 1 million lines of code, whereas the application is about 5 million lines of code when you export everything, including properties and metadata elements.
Wow.
So now we can see the comparison. We can see the fields that we have added Planet. We can see the address field group has also got a new field called Planet. So this information is extracted from this AOT, from the metadata repository, and we use it both for developing like this, but also in the layering system, so our partners can compare with the different layers. When they make a modification, they can see, well, what did we actually change? This is very, very powerful in upgrade scenarios as well, because you can compare and figure out what you changed.
Great.
Yeah.
So you built the platform, you built the tools, and application developers built on top of that, right?
That's true.
Hopefully we'll hear more about how they get to develop features in Exactus.
I hope so. I certainly hope so.
AX.
In Dynamics AX, yes.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.